This Week in HPC by Intersect 360 Research. Actionable insights for today's advanced computing world.
Nvidia invests in Intel.
All investment is AI.
It's This Week in HPC. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of This Week in HPC with Intersect 360 Research and distributed in partnership with HPC Wire. I'm Addison Snell, and that once again is Doug Edline. And Doug, this week in HPC, we've got a whopper that was today in HPC. We're fresh off of a press release that announced a $5 billion investment by Nvidia into its rival Intel, including a collaboration on future CPU, GPU integration. Doug, do you want to break down the basics of what's going on here?
Yeah, so first of all, this was, if you think about it, a very good idea on both parts. However, if I had heard, 6-8 months ago, Nvidia investing in Intel, I would have sat up straight and said, what are you talking about? So there's a thing that Nvidia announced a little while ago, maybe 3-4 months ago, called NVLink Fusion, where they were basically going to open up their NVLink API for other vendors to use. So this is really, from a technical standpoint, it's an NVLink deal where it looks like, according to the press release and press conference, that x86 processors from Intel will have capabilities to directly connect with NVLink. And as Jensen talked about, they'll be able to build a comparable NVLink 72 system with x86 versus the NVIDIA custom ARM processors. So for those that prefer x86 and for the data centers that live in x86, this is actually a pretty big deal for Intel and Nvidia. I mean, it's basically they decided to shake hands and say, let's work together in a very serious way. Now, the other thing that we may not cover too much today is there's also the desktop, laptop piece to this, where they're going to be talking about doing some integration with Intel processors and NVIDIA chiplets. To me, the big thing is the data center piece here, which translates to HPC, and the ability of Intel x86 processors to directly connect to NVLink, which means they can directly connect to GPUs. So that's, in a nutshell, what this is about.
I think it's an astonishing deal and really in some ways a conclusion of what we've seen as this partnership and part competition between Intel and Nvidia over the last 15 years. This has been ramping up for some time, and Intel really, in failing to come out with a competing GPU as AI dominated the data center space over the last several years, wound up in this position where it had few choices. And in our previous episode of This Week in HPC, we talked about the U.S. government converting its grants from the CHIP Act into a part ownership stake. I think Intel was strong-armed into that in a way. This investment from Nvidia, I think it does ensure long-term survival of Intel, but in that way, it feels to me like the treaty at the end of a war that Intel has effectively lost. Intel has given up the territory that it lost to Nvidia, and they've agreed to allow Nvidia to continue to occupy it, and they'll help Nvidia to do so. This is a long-term truce, but it's one where Nvidia has clearly gotten the better of it in the long term.
Yeah, well, as we've talked about, Intel really didn't have a lot of ground to work on here in terms of their GPU story. So they needed something. And, the fact that the AMD has a GPU story, they didn't. And the other fact is that NVIDIA, while they had their ARM story, I don't think that was selling too well to the mainstream. Now, Jensen was very clear. They're not giving up on ARM by any stretch of the imagination. However, the x86 platform in the data center is growing. It's not going anywhere. And this was a way Intel can offer them to get into the game, basically, in the data center in a very big way. So we'll see how this plays out. And again, yeah, I think it is interesting to see two very competitive companies kind of say, all right, let's sit down and see what we can work out here.
I completely agree with you, and I don't underestimate what problem this solves for Nvidia. This is a real stroke for Nvidia to get this kind of partnership with Intel in the long run. And to underscore that, I'll refer back to what we wrote in a vendor profile about Nvidia. We did vendor profiles of all the major vendors in 2019. And part of that analysis was to look at a SWOT analysis for each company. Under the weaknesses section for Nvidia 6 years ago in 2019, what we wrote was Nvidia's weaknesses include, and there were 2 bullet points. 1, the GPU is a slave processor and the healthy long-term CPU partner was missing. And 2, the co-opetition with Intel. And if you'll permit me to read 2 paragraphs that it said, Nvidia has done so well in recent years. This was written in 2019, mind you. Its only true weakness stems from what it cannot directly control. A GPU is an accelerator. It can make things faster, and in some cases, it can run an application entirely, but it does not run the full operating environment. A GPU is an optional server component. A CPU is required. This matters a great deal because Intel is the dominant provider of CPUs for enterprise servers and for HPC specifically, and Intel is Nvidia's most direct competitor. The more GPUs Nvidia sells for computation, the fewer CPUs Intel sells for the same. Looked at the other way, Nvidia is gaining share of configuration budget that used to belong to Intel. That report went on later to talk about a major threat then being the Intel Xe GPU, which was still then on the horizon, which never really materialized, and continued to open this opportunity for Nvidia. But where that leaves us is that even with Grace and its follow-on Vera, there were a lot of the data center space that wasn't looking at really relishing the conversion from x86 over to an ARM environment. There's a lot of software that still runs on x86. This gives Nvidia the long-term in, where it doesn't matter if it's x86 processors and people want to stay on Intel. Nvidia guarantees its future as an accelerator through this partnership with Intel. It really means that even if Grace and Vera fail, which I doubt they will in the long run, but even if they did, Intel can't force Nvidia out of the equation by winning on the CPU side.
Yeah, you're exactly hitting the nail on the head here. And the other piece, though, I wanted to bring up, on the call, there were lots of questions about process and, who's going to make the chips? Is NVIDIA going to use Intel? And they were very clear they're not talking about that right now. And I got to believe there's a little bit of this backroom discussion going on about the fact that Intel has good process capabilities, the single source TSMC that everyone kind of worries about sometimes. So there might be, in the future, I would expect some arrangements there, and the fact that Intel also uses TSMC. So it's something that we may see come out in the long run, that there may be some cooperation if Intel's process continues to succeed as they say it is. When they actually get down to manufacturing some of these chips, there may be more agreement there than what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion today about the fab process and would Intel fab the chips and where does TSMC fit. I think that Intel and Nvidia both have options here. That there's a national interest in having Intel succeed as a fab and building up American fabs, but I don't think it's an all or nothing proposition anymore. And in terms of long-term competition, it really emphasizes the point that this solidifies Nvidia's place while the hyperscale companies, many of them are designing their own processors. We talk about processors from AWS and like Graviton and the TPUs from Google and Maya and Cobalt from Microsoft, et cetera. And in the 2030s, if that becomes a competition between Nvidia and the hyperscales, that's the new co-opetition right now. By the way, I used that term before. The old co-opetition was Intel and Nvidia. The new co-opetition is Nvidia with its hyperscale partners. That's going to be the new race to watch.
Yeah, and some of the rumors I've heard about Google going commercial with their TPUs is something that I'm sure Nvidia has their eye on as well.
Yeah, that gets into our other big story this week in HPC, which is that I covered the AI Infra Summit last week. I talked about it some more at the SNIA Developer Conference this week, but it also relates, Doug, into a story that you wrote in HPC Wire. If AI sneezes, do we all catch a cold? And really, the story is that all of this investment now is dominated by AI. Jensen said in the press conference today, referring to the data center segment of CPUs, that it was roughly a $30 billion total market right now. That would agree with our numbers about the space if you take for granted that the entire data center space is in some way an AI opportunity. Some of it is accelerated now, some of it isn't. But is AI the data center? Is there part of the data center that's not AI? When I was at the AI Infra Summit, it really felt like it was dominated by hyperscale talk, and it was dominated by AI is hyperscale, is data center.
Yeah, well, the point of my article I was trying to make, because actually there's a chart at the very end that was very disturbing to me, was that if you look at the US GDP, about 35 to 45% of it is basically tech investment, tech CapEx. And we all know what that is. AI investment, whether it be data centers, GPUs, x86, whatever. That's where the money's going. And that's kind of like, in terms of investment advice, don't put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing. And the only reason I'm concerned about that is, there's some talk about AI and AI bubble and things not working as well as everybody thought they would, and the amounts of money going into this. I want to be clear. I like AI. I think it's a great technology. And I think we're at the point now where, and Gartner even said this, we're kind of coming off the top of the hype curve, and things are maybe getting a little real. And then people are saying, we could be in a bubble situation, including Sam Altman, that could affect our GDP, basically our GDP, if the bubble starts to deflate in some capacity.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to look at here is segmentation. AI is so big and so dominant that talking about it like it's all one thing really does us a disservice here. And this was the focus of a few walk and talk videos I did around AI Infra Summit that our listeners can find on my LinkedIn feed, among other places on social media. And one of the things we talk about a lot is this notion of AI for science or innovation. It's part of the America AI Action Plan. We talked about that before. This idea of a new industrial revolution, which is a phrase that appears there and also Jensen uses all the time. We're going to cure diseases and find new energy sources and predict the weather. I believe AI will have a role in all of that, but really most of what I'm seeing out there is Gen AI for things like, I want a picture of a dog riding a scooter on his way to a work meeting, right? And it's consumer whimsical things like that. That's the vast majority of it. Then there's a horizontal enterprise AI stripe that's help me write an email or come up with a business plan or an agenda for a staff meeting, summarize these notes, do some coding. A customer service chatbot is horizontal. And very little of the investment out there is actually on the top line, AI for science. This matters because something I said in my keynote at SDC is, this is an important point. AI is not designed to give you the right answer. That's what math is for. AI is designed to give you the expected answer or the trained answer, and how you train it depends on how you act. You can train a dog to attack somebody, then it does. Is that the right behavior or not? Is it a guard dog? Is it a police dog? Or did your dog just bite a kid at a birthday party? Right? If you train the dog to bite someone and it does, then as far as the dog is concerned, that's the right behavior. So how you apply that to scientific advancement, I think that's a big open question. And there were talks at AI Infra Summit that really referred to that as a future wave of AI that's 5 to 10 years out, not the current wave of Gen AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things when I talk to other HPC people about AI, I also say, we're used to getting what I call the answer based on a given amount of compute, data, et cetera, we get the best answer we can. And AI, as you say, is not about getting the best answer. It's getting statistically the answer it thinks we want to hear based on the input, not that it knows who we are or anything like that. And absolutely, the segments for different parts of AI are usually missed. And I'll give you a quick example. My brother is a physician, and I was talking to him about AI, and he goes, "Oh, I have this thing. I've been using it for years." His group uses it. It will summarize and clean up his physician notes. And he says it's absolutely remarkable how well it works. And it's not earth shattering. He said it makes my life a lot easier. And it's a great little application, and it stays in its lane basically and doing well what it does well. And in another sense, things like Grammarly, which is a way to help writing and pick up spelling errors and punctuation and so forth. They use AI for that as well. So they're not using huge LLM foundation models for this. They're pretty much, like I said, staying in their lane, developing tools for specific segments.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be anti-AI. I'm pro-AI. This is a wonderful, magnificent approach to computation that really will carry us into the future. All of those top-line scientific advancements we're talking about, I believe in it. And I believe AI is going to help advance all of those things. I just mean to tell us it's not magic. You can't just point AI at something and it knows how to do it. There's math and science involved, and this is where AI will walk hand in hand with scientific computing, and you need both. And that's highlighted very clearly in our research studies, and in a way that I think we need to look at and segment as part of the AI opportunity. Because if we just say, okay, we're going to go cure disease, and then here's a customer service chatbot, and we think that's the same thing, we have to realize it's not.
You're absolutely correct. And calling everything the same AI, someone who's using a bad chatbot is going to get a really bad flavor for AI. And if it comes up in another instance, another area, they're going to be, I don't trust this. It's not going to work for me because it didn't work here. Where it could be completely different methodology and modality, but it still is under the big tent, the AI tent.
A fun conversation as always, Doug. And as usual, our listeners can get more detail on HPC Wire. You can also get it from Intersect 360 Research. Check out our social channels. And Doug, thanks for wrapping up the news with me. It was a big one.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to This Week in HPC from Intersect 360 Research. Got a question? Comment? Email thisweekinhpc at intersect360.com. Intersect 360 Research. Actionable insights for today's advanced computing world.